All right, so maybe you've heard this little lick or riff before. I'm going to be using the chord E or E7, and maybe you've heard something like that, or maybe you've heard, it like, or maybe you've heard it like. There's all kinds of different famous ways of soloing and famous licks that feature that little two notes interval. So I wanted to explain how you can not only play it, but kind of understand the logic behind when to play it, why it works. So to understand this, you need to know one simple chord, and it is the E7 chord shape. But yes, you can make the E7th chord simply by lifting your third finger off. And this is because your third finger here is pressing the note E. You already have the note E on these two outer E strings. So by lifting this third finger off of this E major chord, you're not losing or taking anything away that you didn't already have. You're in fact adding in a new sound, which is this open D. And there's a little bit to it, but roughly speaking, E is E. It's 7 notes up from E. There's a little bit more about it being the flat 7th and being from another key or the Mixolydian scale. But as long as you understand the basic idea that you're adding a note into a chord by making it a 7th chord, and it's the 7th note of the scale that chord's made from, that's a pretty good place to start. And you really don't even need to know that to play it. However, if you know this chord E7, maybe you've also seen this version where you press your pinky on the second string, the B string, at the 3rd fret. And this is also the chord E7. You can do it with your third finger replaced back on its normal position for the E major chord, or you can lift this third finger off and basically have this 7th note here, and your pinky pressing the note D here also adds a 7th. So this is why you see different shapes or different versions and voicings of the same chord. This is an E7, but this is an E7. How could there be so many different ways to play the same chord? It's just because there are so many different places you can combine the notes that make that chord. So, yep, there's the easy E7 where you lift the third finger off, and then there's this one where you add the pinky here on the second string. All right, so if you know that E7, take a look at where your pinky's pressing. Again, it's on the 3rd fret of the B string over this chord. If you put your first finger on that note, and then place your second finger on the G string, the 3rd string, so that these two fingers are what I would call diagonal from each other, you have now found the secret little spot. So you can practice first at just making that association. Take your E chord, maybe give it a nice little swing rhythm, or if you think you don't know what to play rhythmically, just strum it once and then see if you can add your pinky there. And now switch and put your first finger where your pinky was, add that second finger diagonally, and then go back to the chord. And then you can hit the strings together. Sliding into them sounds really nice. Or you can, using down up picking usually, you can kind of toggle between the string. The down up picking is key to making that feel really smooth, and also the sliding into the first note. That just gives things a nice, almost like vocalized sort of style. There's also another note available after you've played those two notes. You can put your third finger down on the second string, and it would be 2 frets up from where your first finger is. You probably won't lift your first finger in this case, because you'll probably do something where you'll go back and forth between the third finger note and the first finger note. So you don't want to catch yourself being in this kind of hand motion when you do that. It's better if you can leave those 2 fingers down and then just gently place the third finger without lifting the first finger behind it. If you can find that note, you can... there's a lot of famous licks using that little diagonal two-note combination that slide to the left or descend and lead you back to the E7 chord you started on. Famously, you'll hear something like, or, and that's not as hard as maybe it sounds. I'll show you the placements of those notes, and then you can kind of, if you can find them, you don't have to make it sound like anything first. Just find where the notes are and toy around with them, and then maybe you'll lead yourself here on your own. So again, you start with that diagonal shape, and then as you descend, as you move to the left, you're going to stay on those two strings, the third and second strings. And what I usually do is bar, because it's just easy to get to, and I'm comfortable with that. I could also see the argument for maybe sliding your second finger down to the second fret and using your third finger above it on the next higher string, the second string. Just maybe try both ways, whatever feels comfortable to you. Or bar. And then the last one is to end up right here, which are in the notes of the E chord you'll recognize. So it'd be first finger on the G string and the B string open. So to recap those positions, it's the diagonal place you started, third fret, string 2, fourth fret, string 3, then second fret for both, and then first fret for G, B string open. So I would just start with that. Or, and then strum that E chord, and you've just laid out the blueprint for a lot of famous riffing. If you can slide into the first note of each thing, it'll sound like, and then instead of sliding into that one, you would have to hammer. But that's a famous blues lick too. I call that the little minor major blues fake out. I also have a nickname for this little diagonal spot. Over the years, I've learned to call it, and this is kind of personal, I don't like always teach this to people, but we all come up with little like names and things that we notice to help us remember their significance. And I call this the cradle. Because if you can sit in the cradle while you're soloing or playing over a chord, it gives you a lot of cool licks that you can play and find, and also it gives you a place to go to if you've already kind of been there, done that, and gotten used to using the famous minor pentatonic pattern over that E chord. That's where most people start, with the minor pentatonic. 03, 02, 02, 02, 03, 03. If you don't already know that scale, back up and watch my other video on must-know scale chord relationships, or just look up minor pentatonic pattern 1 or famous minor pentatonic pattern. This is the scale you'll find, 03, 02, 02. The basic logic is you can use that scale to solo over the chord. And that's true, and you can find a lot of stuff just by fiddling around. But if you want to know, well, where can I slide up to from there? That's one of the first things you'll figure out. You can slide up into that cradle note, or note. That'll lead you to some cooler licks than just playing up through the scale well, which sounds kind of stiff and kind of pedantic. But if you can, it's just a little sweeter in that area to play those same notes. So there's one more thing I wanted to sort of get to with this riff. It doesn't just only work over E. You can use this over any major chord where you're trying to do some bluesy riffing, especially if the chord is a 7th chord, or even if it's not, or if it's a 9 chord or some other chord with that same 7th in it. But even if it's just a major chord you're playing, and you know that sound you want, so let me show you real quick how you can move this idea up and use it in any key off of any major chord. So if you take this E7th chord and move it up, let's move it up to A. then you would get this bar chord. So hopefully you already know this bar chord. And just like we took our third finger off here to make this into an E7 chord, I can take this basic major bar chord and lift the pinky finger this time off that spot, and now I have an A7th chord. Also, if I want to, I can put my pinky finger up here on the B string, 1 fret higher than where my third finger sits, and you can see I have that same E7th chord shape that I had down here. It's almost like the nut is the bar. So there's my movable A7th chord on the 5th fret. After midnight, we're gonna let it all hang out. So look at where your pinky is. Quickly switch and trade and put your first finger there. Throw that second finger down and you can access that little cradle spot. So if I'm on A, then if I go to D, works there, back to A, E, D, A. So anyway, I hope that helps a little bit just for people who are already goofing around with lead, or maybe already know the lick and just wanted to kind of see, make sense of how it relates back to the chord you're soloing over. Subscribe and like if you want me to do more videos. Thanks.